The ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine has drawn significant international attention, especially regarding the role of the United States and NATO. One of the more contentious and alarming assertions is the claim that the United States has been launching missiles from Ukrainian territory, targeting Russian positions. This claim raises an important question: why would the US choose to attack Russia through Ukraine, and not directly? The answer to this question is deeply tied to the nature of modern warfare, international relations, and the complexity of military capabilities. To begin, it's essential to understand the scale and capabilities of the missiles involved in such an alleged attack. Modern missiles, particularly long-range ones with the capability to strike deep into Russian territory, are highly sophisticated and require advanced technology and infrastructure to operate. Ukraine, despite receiving significant military aid from the US and NATO, does not possess the technological expertise or infrastructure necessary to launch missiles of this scale. The military technology required to operate these weapons, especially long-range missiles that can cross vast distances and strike with pinpoint accuracy, is far beyond Ukraine's current capabilities. The US, on the other hand, has a vast array of high-tech weapons and military infrastructure, including long-range precision missiles such as the ATACMS, capable of striking deep into enemy territory. These are the kinds of missiles that could, in theory, be launched from Ukrainian territory but would require American military oversight or involvement. This is why many observers argue that if such missiles are indeed being launched, it is likely the US providing the technology, training, or operational control, without direct public acknowledgement of American involvement in the conflict. This strategy of using Ukraine as a launching pad for such attacks might be seen as a way for the US to maintain some distance from direct involvement in the war, while still exerting influence and pressure on Russia. In many ways, it serves as a plausible deniability tactic. Washington can continue to provide military support to Ukraine, including advanced missile systems, without officially declaring itself at war with Russia. In essence, this allows the US to indirectly escalate the conflict while avoiding the direct consequences of being an active participant in a high-stakes military confrontation with a nuclear power like Russia. But why would the United States risk pushing the conflict to such dangerous extremes? The most plausible reason for the US's continued involvement in the conflict is the preservation of its global hegemony. For decades, the US has maintained a dominant position in international politics, economics, and military power. However, Russia's aggressive actions in Ukraine and China's rise as a global superpower are perceived by many in Washington as challenges to this unipolar world order. For the US, losing its influence in Europe, Central Asia, and even parts of the Middle East to Russia or China would not just be a blow to its strategic interests, it could mark the beginning of a multipolar world where US dominance is no longer a given. This, in turn, could have far-reaching consequences for global politics and the international order that has existed since the end of World War II. As such, the US administration, particularly under President Joe Biden, might view this conflict as an existential struggle to maintain its status as the world's preeminent power. To that end, supporting Ukraine with weapons and resources becomes a means of combating Russian influence in Europe. However, while these geopolitical ambitions are clear, the risks involved are terrifying. The use of advanced weaponry in this conflict, whether missiles or other long-range systems, carries the real danger of escalation into a much broader war, possibly even a nuclear conflict. This is where the complexity of the situation grows even more concerning. At the same time, it is also critical to recognize that Russia itself is fully aware of the consequences of escalation. Vladimir Putin, though known for his aggressive rhetoric, also understands the devastating implications of a nuclear war. The Russian military has vast nuclear capabilities, but even Russia has repeatedly emphasized its reluctance to engage in nuclear conflict, given that such a war would leave no survivors. While Russia has made bold statements about using nuclear weapons if its territory is threatened, it is unlikely to initiate such an action unless absolutely cornered, as the aftermath would likely be catastrophic for all parties involved. This mutual understanding of the potential devastation of nuclear war has, historically, played a role in preventing direct large-scale military confrontations between nuclear-armed nations. Still, the risk of miscalculation or misunderstanding is ever present, especially as military technology advances and both sides engage in more aggressive posturing. So why would the US push the boundaries, even if it means risking such an escalation? There are multiple strategic factors at play. The United States is deeply invested in undermining Russia's ambitions in Europe and preventing the spread of its influence. For Washington, Ukraine represents not just a buffer state but a critical point in preventing Russia from reclaiming its former sphere of influence in Eastern Europe. Additionally, the war in Ukraine has served as a battleground for the broader US-China rivalry, with Moscow and Beijing seen as allies in challenging US dominance. The conflict, therefore, has larger ramifications for the US beyond the borders of Ukraine. It is, in many ways, a proxy war for global supremacy. This may explain why the US would take such drastic steps in arming Ukraine and using its territory for missile launches. However, the case tie-in remains. Is the United States intentionally trying to provoke a nuclear war with Russia? Most experts argue that the answer is no. Despite the rhetoric and accusations that may fly in the media, both Washington and Moscow understand the futility of nuclear war. The use of nuclear weapons would lead to catastrophic consequences, and both sides have historically been cautious, even in the heat of the Cold War, to avoid crossing that line. Yet, the complexity of modern warfare, the growing pressure on leaders to demonstrate power, and the unpredictable nature of conflict make this situation all the more precarious. The international community, especially in Western capitals, must remain vigilant and ensure that actions taken by any side are tempered by a commitment to de-escalation and diplomacy. In conclusion, the US's involvement in the war in Ukraine, particularly through the provision of advanced weaponry and the potential use of Ukrainian territory to launch missile strikes and Russia, is a manifestation of its broader geopolitical strategy to maintain global dominance and counter Russia's influence. However, this strategy is fraught with risks, not only because of the potential for escalation into a direct confrontation with Russia, but also because of the broader implications for global peace and security. The situation remains highly volatile, and while the risk of direct nuclear conflict is not inevitable, it is certainly not off the table. Ultimately, the world is watching, hoping that diplomacy will guide the way and that the future will not be defined by military escalation, but by a renewed commitment to peace and stability.